is Jack Gannon, and this is my deep dive presentation on the 2008 Russo Georgian War. To understand the 2008 Russo Georgian War, you first need to understand the breakaway republics of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. With a strong ethnic minority population, both of them were semi autonomous republics in the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic. And when independence came for Georgia, they both almost immediately started a war. Abkhazia earlier in 92, and then South Ossetia in 94, I believe. And the two presidents of independent Georgia, Gamsakhurdia and Shevardnadze, both in the eyes of the public and history in general, fumbled uh, the separatist movement. They were able to break away with large success. And Mikhail Saakashvili, the president in 2008, campaigned on fixing this issue, but unfortunately for him, Putin and Russia at the time was becoming more and more belligerent and anti-West. Specifically in 2004, weapons started funneling into specifically Abkhazia, and funnily enough, Russian intelligence officers were the defense minister of Abkhazia and the prime minister of South Ossetia, which doesn't bode well for their independence from Russia. Um, Things kind of continued on. There were Russian planes and military buildup, but in 2008 specifically, there was a military exercise by Russia called Kavkaz 2008 with around 8,000 troops right on the border, and it did end on August 2nd when it was supposed to. And there was Georgia and South Ossetia specifically were trading shelling in villages around early August, and by August 7th, at 11 p.m., Mikhail Saakashvili received word that a Russian convoy of 100 vehicles had crossed the Roki Tunnel, seen here on the left. And by that point, he decided to start shelling Sinkvali, which is the capital of South Ossetia. And this spiraled into a full scale war, which Georgia did not do very well in. Russia swept into Georgia. The only part of either of the two republics that Georgia controlled outright was the Kodori Gorge in Abkhazia, which was taken almost immediately. And Russian troops made it all the way to Gori, which is less than 100 miles away from the capital. And it basically splits the country in two. There's a highway system, and Gori is almost right in the middle of it. And the picture on the right is the aftermath of some of the bombing campaign in Gori, which is really brutal. And that happened by the 11th. By the 12th, Nicolas Sarkozy, the French president at the time, arrives at the peace plan, or actually more accurately, a ceasefire plan. And the Russian president at the time, Dmitry Medvedev, he, along with Saakashvili, accepted it, but the Russians really only left by the 22nd, and then, and even then, they only withdrew to South Ossetia and Abkhazia and moved to recognize them by that time, causing strong Western outcry. And in the end, there was estimated to be over 100,000 Georgians internally displaced, and it was a really brutal and traumatic war for the Georgian people. The Russo Georgian War held many lessons for Russian society and government, one of which was the performance of the military. Despite what I said in the last slide, Russia's military did not perform especially well. There was a lot of kind of institutional breakdown at the highest levels. There was an anecdote where there was a unit invading into Georgia, and none of them really knew what they were doing because the commander was like loading all their maps and other fact finding material into a car and transporting for a day, so they were kind of in the dark. There was an anecdote where the lieutenant general of a commanding force was forced to commandeer a cell phone from a journalist to issue commands to his own army. Um, there was no really air support of any kind. Uh, they were blocked from the American GPS system, and their own satellite system was not especially useful in Georgia, so they were flying blind for a vast majority of the conflict. And Putin and the more hawkish members of the Russian military took note of this and decided to streamline it a little. Instead of the big ponderous Soviet era, they moved now towards a modern model of fast response, even more kind of uh, wet work, you'd say. The little little green men, which happened in Ukraine, happened after this, and I think he learned some lessons from there. And kind of moving on from that, the 2008 Georgian War was basically the end of the thawing of relations after the Cold War and the beginning of the current neo Cold War terrible relations between the West and Russia. You can see all the hallmarks of Putin's warmongering playbook. There is genocide of Russian speakers by Nazis, and it is our duty to protect them. An interesting thing I found was the Medvedev doctrine, which Dmitry Medvedev was the president at the time. Putin was term limited, so he had to kind of switch and be the prime minister while Medvedev was the president. And Medvedev codified this doctrine in the aftermath of the war. And during this interview with a journalist, he mentioned that protecting the lives and dignity of our citizens, wherever they may be, is an unquestionable priority for our country. And also mentioned that there are regions in which Russia has privileged interests, both of which are textbook Putin. He believes that there are spheres of influence that any country is entitled to have, and the U.S. should stay out of his. And if there are Russian speakers and their interests being affected anywhere, it is his moral duty to go and fix it. Um, and more than that, even the 2008 war really gave Russia the green light to invade other places, invade Ukraine, not that long afterwards, because when Russia, as I mentioned before, Russia slow walked the ceasefire agreement, and the West really didn't do anything. Uh, Obama and Sarkozy and the German chancellor at the time all kind of issued strongly worded statements and then slapped a few sanctions and didn't really do anything. And this kind of taught Putin that his aggression will be, as long as he doesn't go too overboard with it, his aggression will be rewarded. And I think that the fact that Russia doesn't have to follow the rules based international order, I believe, is the biggest lesson that they took from the 2008 Russo Georgian War.